Good afternoon, morning, evening, whenever you happen to be watching this. I just wanted to drop a quick little video about master narratives. I've asked you to respond to what the master narrative of, it's actually two things, your career, right, or chosen career path or major, and one master narrative of your identity. And you may be wondering what exactly a master narrative is. The easiest way I can think to explain it is, one, these narratives are stories that we tell over time, and they develop with each new individual story that we tell, but they all go together to reinforce a particular idea. So a master narrative, okay, would be a construct made out of ideas that end up being communicated in stories. All right, one example, okay, there's a master narrative for, again, every career field. Who traditionally belongs here, right? So if you think about IT, computer programming, do you have a certain, right, kind of individual in your mind that belongs in that field? Is this field made up of gamers, for instance, in your mind, right? Is it made up of primarily men or women? Anglos, people of color, right? Are you an insider or an outsider in that field? Because there's a master narrative, all right, of who traditionally would work as a professor or teacher, as, right, nurses or doctors. And these master narratives intersect with one another. The easiest way, I think, to get at it is to look at the master narrative of gender or masculinity and femininity, right? Whether or not you agree, right, with what the master narrative says. If there's one in play, it's very, very easy for you to go to answer, for instance, the following question. If I were to say, take rooms, spaces in the American home, all right, and divide them into masculine and feminine places, right? What are some examples of feminine rooms or places in the house? Very common answers include the kitchen, the bathroom, the craft room, if there is one, closets as feminine spaces. Whereas masculine spaces, man cave, it's right there in the name, right? The den, the garage. If you're talking about outside, even Lowe's and Home Depot commercials are going to reinforce the idea that, here comes the dude and he's got the 2x4s and the drills, and here she comes with a wheelbarrow of flowers to plant in the garden. All right, so whether or not you agree with this division, right, if there is an easy answer, oh, that's a feminine space, that's a masculine space, according to the stories, the commercials, the sitcoms that we've seen, that's a master narrative in operation. There is an idea of what it means to be masculine or feminine, right? And then we divide up spaces and places that we would put traditionally, our ideas would put people of a particular gender, ability, race, class, etc. Right? If I were to say art museum, what kind of people go to an art museum? Right? Find that concept in your mind. Your understanding of who that is going to be a master narrative, right? Does the master narrative change? In other words, does our idea in today's example, of what masculine or feminine is, change over time? Yes, it does. But it changes very, very slowly because we have to have personal narratives and what are called counter narratives, or people who say, you know what, this idea that we've had doesn't match with my experience. I'm going to tell a different story. And when enough people begin to tell a different story, the master narrative changes. All right, so the master narrative is a story, again, told and developed over time. And we inherit these stories. Right? We are born into these stories so that challenging them or mounting a counter narrative really feels like nonconformity, rebellion, right? Because this story is so solidly in our mind and we see it everywhere we look. Sometimes it's very explicit and sometimes it's really, really subtle. Right? Like the commercials. We're just showing people doing home improvement, man. But when you begin to divide up which gender has what job, that's the master narrative. Okay? So that's how you begin to recognize them. This is just a short primer. There's a lot more to unpack, and we're going to do that as the term goes on. But when you're reading an artifact, look for where the artist, author, filmmaker is either defaulting to the existing master narrative or trying to challenge it.